Hello and welcome to the Fall Start Fantasy Podcast, episode 23. Your favorite co-hosts Josh and Cameron are here to talk to you about our NFC West roundup and some news that has broken on the NFL landscape. But first, how's my favorite co-host doing, Josh?
I'm doing pretty well today. Yet another day off, so nice and relaxing finally.
It's good to hear. Good to hear. I went bowling today for work. That's why we're recording the podcast an hour later. Uh, Big work event where we all went bowling, and I bowled a 186. I'm still pretty proud of that.
Not good enough, not getting above 200.
Man, I actually had the chance. I messed up two spares, and those spares had been, or if those had been spares, I would have broken 200. But oh well, not too concerned about it.
hmm
I was talking to a high school friend of mine, and he's like, "Yeah, I went bowling the other day," and I was like, "Oh, was it that bad?" He's like, "No, I bowled a 260." I'm just like, I hate you.
Hear that? I'm like, holy cow, they're good. For
Yeah,
me, I can get above 120. It's a really, excuse me, they're really good game.
yeah. No, he was pretty proud of himself. That wasn't his best ever, but it's pretty close. And we were on the bowling team in high school, so that was like that was pretty cool to hear. But let's switch over to the NFL. We were just talking about the Chiefs and the discussion of should they re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster. I say no. You say yes for the right price. Am I right?
If we can get him for the right price, I would say yes. However, I don't think that's going to happen, so I'm leaning towards no, but if the right price did come up, then sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I of course would say it for the right price again. If he takes the current contract that he has, of course I'd like to have him again. But
hmm
um, Chiefs right now are just barely under the cap, so they're they're okay, but they can make a lot of moves, be in a good spot. What would be the right price to you for Juju? I'll pull up what his contract was this year, but let's see. Juju, wow, definitely did have a really cheap roster with only a 3 million cap hit. I think he got $1 million for bonus for winning the Super Bowl. So
Yeah, because I know a lot of his contract was incentive based for its max possibility, which I think he hit all but like one of them.
yeah, let's see.
But
Catch incentives 40, 50, 65, and he earned all of them. Yeah, it looks like he earned every single incentive that he had. So pretty good for him there.
I mean, he's only 26. He does have the knee problem, which I think is literally his own hold back as far as like how long you want to sign him. But I mean, heck, if it was like 5 million per year on average right now, say we could do that. Maybe backload it. Oh,
Yeah, you
this year.
said how much?
How much did you say his contract was this year?
3 million.
3 million. Does that count all the incentives?
Uh huh. At
Okay.
least that was the cap hit, and that's all that really matters.
Okay. I guess cap hit wise, about 5 million per year.
Yeah, Spot Rack has him estimated 14.6 million. That's how much they're saying he is worth, and then PFF says 12 million over 3 years. So I don't know if the Chiefs are willing to pay that much for him. Um, I think they can. They can definitely bring that up, but they're probably going to be deciding between Juju and Orlando Brown this offseason, and I think they'll probably go with the tackle.
Which, who knows? There's some other news that we'll talk about here in a little bit that might change
Absolutely.
those discussions.
So it seems like the perfect transition to me as we open up into our news segment, and we are needing a news segment title. Didn't come up with anything in time. We're in the off season, baby. That means news is going to be here, and we're going to go over it every single week. But we'll go ahead and start with this. Franchise tag just became available for all NFL teams. They just found out yesterday that the unrestricted franchise tag is something they can use on any player on the team that needs to be that doesn't have a contract currently. And for those who are new to what the franchise tag is, it's basically a way for NFL teams to sign a player to a 1-year deal with top of the line, with top of the line money, but only for a 1-year deal. And teams will do it because they don't want to work out a long-term contract with someone. So you're like, hey, I don't really know if Drew Lock's going to be our guy for the future, but we want to give him a chance. But he's saying, I want 5 years, $300 million. You're like, okay, we're just going to use a franchise tag on you, give you a year. And hey, if you find out he's worth 5 years, $300 million, then you give him that contract. But if he's worth 1 year, 2 cents, then you're glad you used franchise tag for a year. But teams can do that for all of the positions.
And sometimes it can also be used just kind of extend contract talks, like you weren't able to come to an agreement, however you still want this person on your team, and that's basically just giving you a little bit of a buffer where you can work out the deal.
Yeah, pretty common for running backs to be franchise tagged, as their shelf life, if we want to say that, is pretty short. And so they want as much money as they can on the contract at the start of it. And so they do not like being franchise tagged. And players that think they're worth a lot more than they really are usually end up getting franchise tagged, which is pretty much the running backs.
And certain wide receivers as well.
Absolutely. Well, also with that, the franchise tag means that the opening of the NFL free agency has happened, and then players are able to be released. And the Titans went ahead and jumped out ahead of that, didn't they?
That's one way to put it. I did not see this coming at all, especially with the first name on there, Taylor Lewan. Probably one of the better tackles when healthy I've seen over the last 5, 10 years almost. It's just a stud, and got rid of him. Apparently they thought he cost too much money or something. I don't know.
Yeah, from what I've read, he failed his most recent physical, and at 32 years old, they had used up all of his guaranteed money, and so they decided to cut him and save the rest of his entire contract. And pretty much the same thing with the other two players. Robert Woods, who was 31 years old, all of his guaranteed money's gone, so free to leave. And then Randy Bullock was their kicker this year, who was just kind of mediocre. Anyways, it sucks that these players kind of went out like this, but they have been released from the Titans, and I want to give us a little bit of credit. I was listening to that first episode, and we said all of these moves were potentially likely, as they are older players, and this is a team that needs to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing, I think it was Adam Schefter, but it might have been Tom. I can never say his last name correctly. We'll just go Tom P.
Sure, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's something like, before today, Titans were 25 million over the cap, and then after today, they're now 4 million under. So they had some definite cap hits. They're obviously going to restructure stuff so they have money, but definitely hurts on that one, just losing that much money.
Yeah, it's like congrats to them for getting under the cap, and with some restructuring, they will be in a decent spot. But they're an old team now, and it's not like they're going to be that under the cap. There's not that much money that can be moved. And yeah. Other news that we have on here: Eagles Pro Bowlers James Bradbury, Javon Hargrave, linebacker T.J. Edwards, linebacker Kaiser White. Contracts have all been voided already for this year. Philadelphia will have $5 million and $12 million in 2023 cap charges from the bonus of Bradbury and Hargrave. All of them are now unrestricted free agents. So they have to come up with a contract for each of those players, or they're letting them walk. And considering the fact that 2 of those are Pro Bowlers and 2 of them were starting linebackers on a defense that it was really awesome this year, that is a big deal. Expect a lot of changes to the Eagles' defense.
It'll definitely be interesting to see what happens on that one, if they can keep any of them, get a new contract, or your chances to get someone different.
Yeah, I'm not sure really if any of them will be coming back. Jalen Hurts is the guy they got to pay. I think he's on year 3. This was year 3. Year 4 is next year, so they have 1 more year with him on his rookie contract, and then they're going to be paying him a lot of money. He was a second-round pick, so he doesn't get the 5th-year option. So I think they're probably going to have to let all these players walk so they can afford Jalen Hurts in the future.
Which, understandable. Jalen Hurts is good, but at the same time, it hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. Other news: Bucks decided that they will be taking the full cap hit of Tom Brady, and I imagine that would mean they're also going to take the full cap hit of all the players that are probably going to retire on their team. They have a couple of defensive and offensive linemen that are pretty old. Julio Jones is a player who's probably going to retire as well. Cameron Brate could retire, which means that these are some contracts that if they're taking the full cap hit of Tom Brady, they're probably going to take the full cap hit of all of them. So expect them to have a new head coach next year because this team's going to be bad. I had said that if they moved all the money, they would be in an okay spot for next year. They've decided they're not going to move the money, so they're going to be a very bad spot for next year.
Shooting for that first overall pick.
Yeah, I am seriously shocked though. It's a very weak NFC South division right now. Move the money back just another year because your head coach has already been. There's been claims asking for him to be fired for having such a bad year in year 1. It's a lot of confidence from the GM saying like, I don't really care if you fire my head coach, but that's the GM's decision. The head coach has got to coach up the new guys they're going to be bringing in.
Yep. It did surprise me. Like, you just taking the full cap hit, I can maybe see it taking half because you still always want to compete. But, yeah. Expect the Bucks to have a top 5 pick this next year.
Yeah, and the last bit of news we have is Derek Carr finished up his interview with the Jets. He is an unrestricted free agent, so he could sign his contract any day that he wants to, with whatever team decides him. I know right now that the Jets and the Saints are 2 of the top bidders on Derek Carr. I think that the Falcons should be in on Derek Carr. Personally, really like that fit for them. PFF says that Derek Carr is worth $30 million a year. I don't know. What do you think about that, Josh?
Let's say the Jets, I could see 30 million at least because they're desperate for at least a mediocre QB.
Yeah, 32 years old. The PFF saying 2 years, $30 million, and they're saying Daniel Jones is worth 5-year, $40 million a year. So, I guess, would you rather pay Daniel Jones $40 million, or would you rather pay Derek Carr $30 million?
That's tough because Daniel Jones actually had an okay year.
He did only have 15 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. We keep saying okay year, but it's just like when you hear that number, you go, "Wow, that's terrible."
At the same time, you got to give him some credit. He had no receivers.
That's definitely true, and Saquon Barkley definitely scooped up a lot of those touchdowns.
Yeah, so
Derek Carr had 24 passing touchdowns, by the way.
I'd say 25 million, roughly around that number, would be for Carr. That'd be pretty good for him. Obviously, just because he's been a pretty solid QB over the last few years, especially these last few seasons, I think he could get a little bit more.
Yeah,
depending on which team it goes to, but I'd say around 25 million in my opinion.
Yeah, if I was the Falcons, I'd totally be okay with Derek Carr 30, 32 million around there, and just making so much of it incentive based. They have a good situation there, and they're going to be bringing in some running backs. So it's going to be a run focused team, and then two awesome receiving weapons that will catch anything you throw in their direction. Derek Carr seems like, hey, come get your bag. You just got to earn it here. But we'll see where he ends up going. Final prediction: where do you think he'll end up?
I really hope he ends up with the Jets. I think I actually like the Jets. They have some really good players that I like to watch. I think with Derek Carr at the helm, they might be able to make a playoff push. I'm not saying they're going to dethrone the Bills, but they can at least take a shot at it.
I'd say there's a chance. But I guess we'll see. That wraps up our news for the week. We'll have some more news next week. Hopefully, some franchise tag news, and we're gonna go ahead and jump into our divisional roundup, starting with the NFC West and the 49ers. This week, I'll be throwing this one to Whopper.
All right, so we got the 49ers up, the runners up in the NFC. Head coach still Kyle Shanahan, offensive mastermind, one of the best coaches out there. Don't need to say anything else more about this guy. However, right now the offensive coordinator is an open slot. Excuse me there. They still haven't announced who it's going to be. I haven't even seen any rumors really yet, so I have no idea who it is going to be. But here are the two people, at least looking at their staff that they currently have, that stand out to me. First is Chris Forrester. He is the offensive line run game coordinator. When you look at how good the offense was, they were top 15 in basically every single stat, but they were really top tier when it came to running. So having your run game coordinator just move up to offense coordinator, plus these coaches at a line, this makes perfect sense to me. Outside of that, it'd probably be Anthony Lind, I would say. He's assistant head coach. He's a running backs coach, so it just kind of makes sense on that one as well.
Yeah, Lynn had some hype last year, and I definitely like the offensive line and run game coordinator. That is a very good part of the team.
Again, I haven't even heard any rumors really when it came to that position, so at least looking within from what I can find, that's probably my two guesses on who it could be. But like I was mentioning, this was a very good offense. They were pretty much top 15 in basically any relevant stat. I think their worst stat was red zone touchdown percentage, which they were still top 10 when it came to actual red zone touchdowns, so take it, I guess. But basically, top 15 offense. I think they were top 5 rushing as well, if I remember correctly. Defensively, Steve Wilkes is their defensive coordinator, and this was arguably the best defense. If you're looking at just kind of slow them down, get some sacks occasionally, get a turnover, this is probably your best defense out there. I'd say the Cowboys was better as like a big play type of defense. This was just better top to bottom. However, they had one Achilles heel, and you saw this against the Eagles there at the end of the year. It was their pass defense. That's how you beat this team, was through the air. The same thing with the Chiefs. All over them. But their run game, top 10. Basically, the only area they need to fix on that defense is just their secondary. And other than that, they're fine. So let's look at the bad first, going into the offseason. Don't have much cap space. They're above, but not by much. It's roughly about $3 million. It can be restructured quite a bit, which I'll go into that here a little bit. And then I'm going to put this kind of as like a little gray area. They do have 10 draft picks, but they don't have a draft pick until the third round. They don't have any first or second rounders. Obviously, they can move up. Without one of those first 2 round picks, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to manage. And here comes the good. Most core players are still on contract, at least for another year. I didn't look at like contracts and everything, but basically they don't have any notable free agents that they'll be losing. And they can actually save up to $54 million if they were to restructure all contracts. The biggest one would be Trent Williams. If you restructure his, you're actually saving about $13.5 million right there alone. So they'll definitely need to restructure some contracts in order to, actually be able to afford players, but definitely be interesting to see what they do. Um, I think they should try to re-sign Jimmy Ward, Samson Ebicom, Emmanuel Mosley, and I probably wouldn't have had this on here, but I still have it on here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Mike McGlinchey. This is before I saw the Taylor Lewan news, so probably see if you can actually manage to get him.
Depends
49ers
if
have a
he's
decent
healthy, though. Um,
hero. Even then, though, 49ers would probably take that chance because in last 2 years they were one game away from the big one. So
can't argue
um,
there.
they definitely need to shore up that offensive line. Mike McGlinchey. They can't get like Taylor Lewan, or if Orlando Brown hits free agency and someone else picks him up, probably want to re-sign him in that case. Release or trade. One I had is maybe try to trade Eric Armstead. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of Bosa or anything like that. However, Armstead is still a pretty damn good defensive line player. But you might be able to get some trade value out of him. Maybe start getting into the first 2 rounds there since they don't have any picks. And also save some cap as well at the same time. As far as I saw, the players are retiring. And here are some of the players I think they should try to sign or trade for. Top tier defensive backs: Bradley Roby, my bad. James Bradbury, Jesse Bates, Jordan Poyer, any of those kind of players. Cornerback, safety, it doesn't even matter at this point. They just need help back there. Their best defensive players, Ward, Darius Ward, who used to be with the Chiefs, then solid, but he's not top tier. Outside of that, I'd just say extra help for their O line. They have George Kittle, one of the best tight ends. They now have CMC, arguably the best running back there is. At least you can make a case for it. Receiving core: Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. You're solid. Quarterback, that'll be an interesting story to see what happens on that one. As I am hearing rumors that Brock Purdy could be ready for week 1 if they wanted him to be the starter. So instead of Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, now it's Trey Lance and Brock Purdy for who's going to be the starter. Outside of that, just extra help for the O-line. Offensively, that was literally their only weakness. Linebackers are still there. Their D-line is pretty much all still there. So some secondary help, and that would be my plan for the 49ers.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. The 49ers are a team that has been awesome at developing linebackers, defensive linemen, and they've even been able to train a few good safeties. However, that cornerback position is just something they're not It's something they're lacking in, and whether it's development or if the guys that they're bringing in aren't really becoming the guy that they want them to be. I could say that I think Charvarius Ward is a good cornerback, and I think he will definitely be a key part of the team next year. However, the next guy on the depth chart behind him, and that is not a free agent this year, is Ambry Thomas. And if you're like me, you're going, who? Because they have 7 cornerbacks on their depth chart, all signed for next year, and I cannot tell you a single other name than Charvarius Ward. So they do need to figure something out with the cornerback position. I expect them to probably throw to the draft again this year and hope that they can start coaching some guys up, because you can't just keep spending on veterans every single year. But like you said, you can clear up a lot of money by restructuring contracts and moving stuff around. And your 2 starting quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, are both on rookie deals, so you've got money that can be spent elsewhere. And I like targets that you had there for the sign and trade for, especially trading him Eric Armstead. I think there's definitely some teams out there that are going to be like, we need a defensive lineman, our pass rush sucks. And Eric Armstead, who's 30, is still a guy who can produce. It's just he doesn't star on the 49ers defensive line like he would elsewhere. So good
Yeah,
option
kind
for
of
them
hard to
to
start. You got Nick Bosa right beside you.
Yeah, good option for them to get some youth in and develop some players for the future. I think the Lions could be a team that would be interested in him. Maybe they won't go in the same conference. But next team we have on here is the Rams. And Rams fans, it's not all bad, but it's mostly bad. You already know that they have no picks. They have a second, a third, and then a ton of sixths and sevenths going into the draft this offseason, and then they don't have a lot of money. The biggest problem is that they have this old injured roster. Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, Allen Robinson, Cam Akers all missed time last year. Offensive line was this rotating, horrible awfulness that just wasn't communicating very well, was definitely not pass blocking very well, and then they, as we already knew, they could not run block. You can blame Cam Akers and I can't even. Darrell Henderson was on the team at least for some parts of this year, and they had a few other people that all took snaps for that running back room. But if there's no hole for the running back to get there, it doesn't matter really who's going to be on that. So they do need to figure out what they're going to go with there. I think they'll be bringing in someone else to be the backup to Cam Akers. That's not Kyron Williams, but they've got a lot bigger holes. On the good side, I like their coaching staff. Sean McVay is their head coach. Matt LaFleur, offensive coordinator. He is younger brother of LaFleur, the Packers coach. Trying to remember his first name. Mike LaFleur?
I think so. I'll look it up real quick.
Hold on. Okay, Mike LaFleur is the ones who's their coordinator. Matt LaFleur is the Packers head coach. I didn't know that, but he was a Jets offensive coordinator the last 2 years. Reunited back with Sean McVay after not so much success there. I think that'll be good for the team. It's a similar situation to the 49ers where really the head coach is the offensive coordinator. This is just a guy who helps create the vision there. Defensive coordinator is Raheem Morris. Despite a horribly injured and bad roster, they were only a barely below average defense. And while I'm sure Rams fans aren't happy to hear that, oh, good, we were only barely below average, it could have been a lot worse. And I promise you, every other team out there, if they were that banged up, would not have been so successful. However, there is a lot of good for the offense. They can restructure all their contracts, which I think they will, because when players get older, they want more guaranteed money, and restructuring contracts makes that more guaranteed money. They'll have $33 million to play with, and because the rookie picks aren't very high up, there is a plus side to that where they're not that expensive at the same time. They do not have very many important free agents that'll be leaving the team this year. A'Shawn Robinson is a 20-year-old edge rusher who was on the team. However, the guy was really only good in the run defense as an edge rusher, as he had 0 sacks. But we kind of know that Aaron Donald can do most of that on his own anyways. As far as guys that I do think they need to re-sign, I think Taylor Rapp is a safety who fits well into the scheme and already knows the defense. I think he is a good leader for the defense. I think they re-sign him, but the others I am willing to let go so that you can go ahead and make some more or move some more money elsewhere. The next move next moves that I think that they'll be doing kind of signify the end of the Rams' Super Bowl hopes. I think as long as you have Stafford, Kupp, Donald, and Sean McVay as your head coach, the window will be really open. However, trading away Jalen Ramsey, who's a 29-year-old cornerback, is going to save you $6 million. And at this point, he could probably be worth a first and a second, or maybe even 2 firsts to the right team. I think there's quite a few teams out there that would be interested in Jalen Ramsey, especially if they're going to go for a win now chance. I don't think you're going to trade him to the 49ers, who are in the division, but I think there's some AFC teams that are be like, hey, as long as you pay for most of the contract, we'll give you 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey. And that gives him a spot to go for the future. Other player that I think they'll be trading away is Tyler Higbee, 30-year-old tight end. I think the Panthers need a tight end, and it'll save them about $4 million to trade him away to the Panthers. Uh, there's quite a few players that are older, like we said. Of course, Aaron Donald, Stafford, Allen Robinson could all retire. However, the only player that I really think has a significant chance to is Bobby Wagner. He had a good year. Wasn't a career year by any means, but definitely was a bounce back and looked really good on that defense. But he's 33 years old, and you don't know how many years he has left in him to be a great option. So whether or not he retires is going to be a big deal. And then as far as free agents that I think they're going to sign, it's not that many exciting players. I think you need to bring in some juice to the offense. Cam Sims is a fast wide receiver who has played on the Commanders. He's not going to be re-signed back there as they have a full wide receiver room. They are good on that team. I think that he can come over to the Rams and add some speed to that wide receiver core. And Tyler Kroft is a tight end who will be a free agent from the 49ers. I think you can bring him in. McVay and Shanahan, they come from the same coaching tree, so I think he'll be a quick learn into the Rams offense. Won't be a one-for-one replacement with Higbee, but I think you're okay with that. After that, your coaching staff is great at coaching. They know how to build up good players, so I would be interested in seeing if there were any cuts from other teams. You can go to the XFL, USFL players and see if there's anyone who shines enough for a chance on the team. This is a great opportunity for you to see, hey, is there a Kevontae Turpin who can be our punt returner? Is there a PJ Walker who can be our backup QB? And see if those players are worth a chance. But that is my rebuild for the Rams.
It's a pretty solid plan. I really like the idea of trading away Jalen Ramsey. Everyone knows that at this point, the Rams basically sold their soul to try to get a ring, and it did work. I will give that. It did work. But at what cost? And after a year where everyone thought they were still at least going to have a shot to run it back, and then last season, still don't know what happened other than a horrible O-line. And 2 first-rounders. Can start to rebuild that O-line. There's plenty of good offensive linemen in the draft. So I really like that idea of trading him away, what you can get for him.
Yeah. That is the Rams rebuild. It's generally pretty doom and gloom. However, that brings in a lot of money to make those moves. And I do think that those players that I listed can bring in some youth and some offensive firepower. But next team we have on here is Josh, your second favorite team in the entire league. And I know I'm going to surprise everyone. It's not the Raiders. No, it is the Seahawks. Talk to me about what they're not a rebuild. They're already on year 2 of the rebuild.
Yes. And what was their rebuilding year? They managed to make the playoffs. Not like the Chiefs' rebuilding year where they won the Super Bowl. But, pretty good showing still. Coaching staff did the exact same. Pete Carroll still head coach. Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator, and Clint Hurt, he is the coordinator. Offense, they were actually top 15 in pretty much everything, other than rushing and red zone touchdowns. There's a reason why they didn't win all those games. It's because they just simply didn't score enough touchdowns. Defense was really good at getting sacks, turnovers. They were top 15 against the pass. However, they were abysmal against the run. So let's start with the bad. They're still actually having cap hits from players that are no longer on the team. Chris Carson, who retired, which good for him. He needed to retire. His neck was basically broken at that point. And Carlos Dunlap, who just won the Super Bowl with the Chiefs, still almost have $6 million in dead cap together, so that does hurt. Do pay their tight ends a lot, but they do use them. I will give them that. But $17 million for 3 tight ends, that none of them are really a standout. That one hurts. Another one, and I don't think this is too much of an issue, but My favorite player in the league, Tyler Lockett. You guys have probably heard me talk about him way too much at this point. He is 31, but I remember watching an episode, is the Truth series that fantasy footballers do, and they were talking about Lockett's age, and they're just like, yeah, I don't think that'll be an issue. I wanted to say it was Jason from there. He has a quote from another K State player that made pro, Darren Sproles, like, yeah, I'm not going to put, like, hit somebody needlessly. I'm just going to step out of bounds here, try to preserve my body. And people will make a lot of memes about Tyler Lockett just falling down every time he catches it, but he stays healthy most of the time. He only missed 2 or 3 games these last 3 years. So obviously it's working well enough. He's still a good receiver, so however he is slowly getting up there in age. Let's look at the good though. For restructuring, they can save up to 50 million in cap space. They already start, or they can have up to 56. Excuse me, there. They already have 31, so they have plenty of firepower to work with. They have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. Thank you, Denver. So let's talk about who they should resign. Definitely resign Gino. I don't care if it has to be a franchise tag or a long-term deal. He played better than anyone ever expected him to, and was actually one of the better quarterbacks this season. I think they should try to get Puna Ford if they can. It was like the one solid piece of their front seven, really. So if they can get him back, that'd be pretty good. Got the O line. Austin Blythe would be a pretty one to sign again. He's not.
I knew when I saw that he was a free agent, I was like, there's no way the Chiefs player doesn't get a re-sign in Josh's rebuild.
Yeah, he's solid for a center. There's nothing like.
Tough
There's no
spot for
really
him there.
notable centers. Yeah, I'd consider him the top center free agent right now.
Oh, okay. Jason Kelsey slander. I see how it is.
We know he's gonna stay in Philly. He will
Yeah,
take
he'll stay or he'll
1 million.
retire. That's
Yeah, he would he'd be willing to get paid 1 million per year to stay in Philly. So I'm not gonna count him on that. Otherwise, yeah, he would be the Austin Blythe. He's a pretty solid at least center. He's not top tier, but he's solid enough. This O line was pretty good. Center's always kind of the general of the O line, so having him back would be pretty good. This is just a maybe. Again, it kind of depends how the draft works out, but maybe Rashad Penny for depth. Now, obviously, he gets hurt a lot. They had Ken Walker, but that one is just a maybe. It depends what they do in the draft. And they have a lot of really good picks for this draft, so they have options. He wouldn't be a bad depth piece. He probably wouldn't cost too much either. So, release. They would probably want to release Brian. I guess Monet. I don't know. It's a DN.
yeah. I was looking at who their biggest cap hits was, and I was like, who the hell is Brian Money? I'm gonna call him Brian Money. And then it was like he's a edge rusher who's getting paid too much.
Yeah.
Or nose tackle. Sorry.
Either way, D lineman, 2.6 million. Not worth keeping at this point. Looking at retirees, I didn't really notice anyone notable that's in that age where they might be getting ready to retire soon. Closest would probably be Lockett, and I still feel like he's got another 2-3 solid years before he even thinks about it, unless there's a major injury. What they should do though, as far as signing players or anything like that, basically just get any of the Eagles D line players. They got, I forgot what that said, it's like 7 of them. Basically, the entire Eagles D line is going to be gone, so try to get some of those players. They were all very solid. And some of the linebackers I looked at were Deion Jones or Levante David. Their weakest part right now is their front seven when it comes to the defense. Receiver corps, they're solid. They can maybe get a third option in there, but you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, you don't need much else. Talked about their tight ends earlier. Again, they're solid. You got Noah Fant, Will Dissly, and I can't remember his first name, but Parkinson. They're solid.
Colby.
Lee Parkinson.
Mhm.
You
It's
can
fine.
maybe some more running back depth, but I mean, which team doesn't need running back depth at this point? And of course, you probably want to get some O line depth and maybe some more secondary. But outside of that, just get your front seven. That's what really hurt you this last year was your rushing defense. Teams could just run all over Seattle and then some. And they couldn't do anything to stop it. So make that your primary focus when it comes to the offseason. Maybe go for another secondary player, another quarterback to match with Tariq Woolen. Um, shore up the O line, get some depth pieces, maybe get someone else that can replace one of them as a starter in the early rounds of the draft, and go from there.
Yeah, when we get to that draft, it's going to be fun picking players for the Seahawks because they could go quarterback if they wanted a guy to sit behind, running backs in the later round, wide receiver. They can go pretty much any position and be very happy with it. It's definitely going to be an awesome best player available for the Seahawks. Very, very excited for their offseason because they have lots more money than anyone else in the division and a bright future. I think they're re-signing Gino to a decent contract, but because he's already, pretty old, and he knows pretty old, you don't have to break the bank to re-sign him. So uh, it's not going to be a cap reset uh, or market reset contract for Gino. So uh, definitely well earned from him there. Can't wait to see what that contract looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, love the rebuild. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Rashad Penny, and yeah, bringing any Eagles defensive line players. We keep saying they should go to every team, but there's enough of them that they can pretty much go to any team. And the linebackers that you chose out, those are perfect guys that they'll be needing to beef up that front seven. But the last team we have in the NFC West is the Arizona Cardinals. And if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan, you are very unhappy with your team for all the right reasons. Your head coach was a dummy. I we didn't have a podcast when he was hired, but Josh, when I asked you, um, hey, who's this Cliff Kingsbury guy? You went, oh, he's the guy who lost a lot of games with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so he's probably not very good. And you're like, yeah, hoping he just can be the quarterback whisperer to Kyler Murray. And Josh, how'd that work out?
And he had one okay year, but outside of that, nope.
Yeah, exactly. Kyler Murray was a top five QB in Dynasty, and now it's like, is he top 10? Would you rather have Dak? And that's kind of where we're at with Kyler Murray. Um, I am a big believer in him personally, but there's a lot of problems. He had a definite down year. You know that offense is going to change a lot. You know that the new head coach is a defensive minded head coach, so he's probably not going to be that focused on I'm going to babysit Kyler Murray and make sure that he gets everything he could ever want. Oh, your tight end got injured? Let me go trade for Zach Ertz. And oh, let me go draft Trey McBride and da da da. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be probably a defensive focused team. And that means, Kyler, you got to play to the contract that they signed you to. Um, Jonathan Gannon's the new head coach. He's the Eagles defensive coordinator for 2 years. When he came into the Eagles, they were below average defense. For the 2020 2021 seasons, they were well below average in most metrics. And when he came in, he was a top 10 defense for both of the seasons, and obviously was a fantastic defense this year. Now you can say chicken or the egg. Oh, you got all this money to bring in free agents, whatever. He still was able to coach that team up, and the Cardinals are going to have more cap space than most people realize. So I think there's a decent chance that they're able to build up a decent defense this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, not a name I'd heard before. He was the Brown QB coach this last year, who were 22nd in passing yards, so I would not expect a very pass-focused team. And then he coached together with Jonathan Gannon on the Vikings for like 5, 6 years. Uh, Same with a whole lot of their staff, including Nick Rallis, who's the new defensive coordinator, came with Jonathan Gannon from the Eagles, is their linebackers coach, and was. And if you ask me, the linebackers were kind of their worst group on the team, but maybe it's chicken and the egg. We spent all the money elsewhere. Here's the guys you have, and I gotta say, I did like their linebackers. It's just not as much as I liked all their other positions. Biggest problem I have with Nick Rallis as their signing is that the dude's 30 years old, meaning that like a third of the Cardinals roster is all going to be older than their defensive coordinator. Like Rodney Hudson, their starting center, is 35. Zach Ertz is 34. Like DeAndre Hopkins 32. DJ Humphries, their left tackle, is 31. Like they're older than their coach, and I don't know how a team is supposed to take criticism, especially a team that is going to bring in a lot of young players and focus on rebuilding, is supposed to listen to a guy who's gonna be like the same age as them. There's a reason that young people aren't hired to be head coordinators like this. If you want to say the Cardinals are giving him a bad hand, this would be a really weird hire to me. But Jonathan Gannon picked him from the Eagles to come with him, and we're going to see what happens. But I think that immediately brings into something that I was going to say for last, but I'm going to start with the free agents that I think the team should sign. And the first three names are all Eagles players that I think will be coming with him. Boston Scott is going to be a free agent running back. We know what that guy does in the goal line for absolutely blows everyone's mind. But I think he'll sign with the Cardinals, come with the defensive coordinator, and they could use a guy to help out James Conner on that running back room. And then they're going to bring in two linebackers because, hey, you got the defensive coordinator who drafted these guys, or who developed these guys, and the linebackers coach who brought them up. TJ Edwards and Kaiser White, I think, will both be coming over and improving that defensive front seven. We have seen for a while the Cardinals have drafted guys like Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins, who are these linebackers who they're not bad, but they're not the first round picks that we had hoped they would be. So I think they'll be coming in. Good for the team. I talked about the problems. Well, let me first expand more on the problems. The entire offensive line is probably going to be free agents. Probably going to see Rodney Hudson retire or leave, as well as all these other players are probably going to be leaving. They have a bad defense, and they have a bad overall roster. If you could say that the strength of the team currently is the receiving core, but you're probably not going to be running it back with the same receiving core. And you don't know if Trey McBride's really going to be a guy. You don't know if Zach Ertz is going to stay healthy. And so you kind of worry a lot about every part of the roster. But the good, trading DeAndre Hopkins, restructuring contracts, and cutting Robbie Anderson, who now goes by Chosen Anderson, opens you up about $50 million in cap space. That'll let you sign these players that I mentioned, and you have options with your top 5 draft pick. If you want, you can trade it to a team needing a QB, or you can draft guys like a guy like Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. You're not over invested in any of the players. I know that they brought in Hollywood Brown, but they didn't give him a crazy deal by any means. And if they trade DeAndre Hopkins, they have a whole lot of ability to move money on and do what they want to. Few key free agents on the team. Brian Murphy, cornerback. I think they'll re-sign him. Zach Ellens, edge rusher, who could be from the old regime, so they might not choose to re-sign him, but I think they should. Greg Dortch had a career year. I think he's a fine wide receiver for on the team. And Cody Ford is a guard that I think that they'll be re-signing. I'd say they go ahead and let Robbie Anderson, Matt Prater, Justin Pugh, their I think it was their left guard, and Andy Lee, their punter, all go ahead and walk. If I remember right, they already had backups to those positions, so you can go ahead and let them walk or release them. And then J.J. Watt obviously is going to be retiring this year. So that is. Lastly, there were a couple free agents that I do think the team could bring in, and they're not going to be able to make all of these moves. $50 million in cap space is quite a bit of money, but it's not everything. Taylor Lewan is a guy that we talked about who was just released from the Titans. If he is healthy, I do think you can go ahead and bring him onto the team. He was a tackle that was very good for a long time on the Titans, and he's from the Cardinals area, Arizona area. So I think that he would like to come home for one more year, see if he has it, sign a deal, and whether or not he does, he'll be on the Cardinals. I think they'll need to bring in a center to replace Rodney Hudson. Ethan Pochik is the Browns center, who I think did a fine year. Was definitely in the run blocking, and so I would like to see him signed to the possibly a run-focused team there on the Cardinals. And then another player who I think can help out with the run is Alan Lazard. As we know, his biggest skill set is in run blocking as a wide receiver, as well as having the ability to get open when schemed open. I like the idea of him signing on to the Cardinals because I don't think he'll be coming back to the Packers. So that would complement a team that has two pretty small players in Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore, and having a bigger body guy who can do some run blocking whenever you need to put him in there. So that is the Cardinals rebuild. I actually have a lot of hope for the Cardinals. I don't think they'll be good year one, but if their head coach is good, and if Kyler can bounce back and they can make some good draft picks, then I have high hopes for the Cardinals in 2024.
So I couldn't agree more on that one. This year, they're one of those teams to me that are in the running to get the first pick. It's going to be a rough year if you're a Cardinals fan. I'm just going to say sorry in advance on that one. I could be wrong. You could have like another Seattle situation where everyone thought they were going to be competing for the first pick overall, but ended up going to playoffs, but I highly doubt it in this one. Definitely like those free agents go after. Another one would be a pretty good fit for them. See what happens from there.
Yeah, the biggest problem is that Kyler is currently injured, and all of their backup QBs are free agents. So they'll be figuring out that. Wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like PJ Walker over here. So that wraps up the NFC West. Next week we have the NFC East. Josh has called dibs on the Eagles and the G-Men, the Giants, and I will be taking the Cowboys and the new Eric Bieniemy-led Commanders, or at least offensively led Eric Bieniemy Commanders. I think that does it for this week's episode. Josh, you have anything else you wanted to add before we close out?
Please stop tweeting out the Deuce Vaughnn hype. I saw the. I see any ideas. He's mine. I claim dibs on him.
Yeah, did you see my tweet that said, I'm just hyping him up to make you spend a first round pick on him?
I'd spend a first round pick on him anyways.
Well, if you could trade up into there ahead of me, because RB3 Deuce Vaughnn, it's just a player I'm going to make sure that I get ahead of you.
Oh, God. I'll give you all my picks.
All right. That wraps everything up for us. Check us out on Twitter at FalseStartFPod. We'll be back next week, talk about the NFC East. And remember to tune in next week so you can be ready before the ball is snapped. Thank you, and goodbye.